It's Tally Clower. I'm one of the owners of Provident Commercial Finance. We're a factoring company out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And today I wanted to talk to you about how to start your own trucking company. There are a lot of drivers out there that have either been owner operators and have leased onto other people, or they've been company drivers and have decided that they want to go it alone and start their own company. And just want to talk about what that might look like for you today. Uh, the first thing that you want to do, obviously, is form your own company. A lot of folks think they go in the sole proprietor route. It's a good way to do it. We recommend that you form at a minimum an LLC, limited liability company. It's very, very straightforward, easy to do. You can, I think, just about every state now, you can go to the Secretary of State's website and find a way to start a new company. You don't have to get operating agreements or any other organizational documents. You can just go and register yourself with the Secretary of State. Typically, the only time you're going to want to get operating agreements, or if you have more than one owner, just so that the two of you understand how you're going to be running the company together. But if you're an owner operator that wants to go out and start his own business, you can just do a single member LLC and take care of that in about 10 or 15 minutes. Obviously, you need an authority. There's two of them. You've got the DOT, so each state has their Department of Transportation, and you have to have an authority to do it interstate. And then if you're going to haul across state lines, you have to go to the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. You can find all this online again. You have to have at a minimum the DOT authority, but again, if you're going to go across state lines, you have to get your what they call the MC number, motor carrier. And again, the FMCSA is going to give that to you. So you've got your organization, your LLC has been formed. You've got your authority. One thing about the authority, typically from the time you file for it to the time it goes active is usually 30 days. So in the period of the 30 days, you can start looking for loads and who you're going to haul for. There's a ton of different ways that you can go about finding loads. You can do it yourself. There's different things called load boards. Again, these are online places where shippers or brokers are posting their loads. Some of the larger brokers like TQL, JB Hunt, C.H. Robinson, they have their own load boards. You can just go to their websites and look for loads. When you are looking for loads, you obviously want to make sure that you're hauling profitable loads. Just because there's a load to haul doesn't necessarily mean that you ought to take it. And we'll get into how do you bid on loads well here in just a minute. But for now, finding loads, another group of folks that can be helpful, especially for somebody who has hauled for another company for a while or has relationships with other brokers. Use your network. If there are other drivers that you have seen leave and go and start their own companies, and y'all are friends or you know them real well, just get in their back pocket and let them help you find those loads. It may be that they know of loads that you could be hauling. There's also another group of folks called dispatchers. We here at Provident Commercial Finance have some relationships with dispatchers that we try to get our clients, our trucking companies, in touch with if they're having a tough time finding loads. Basically, what a dispatcher does is goes out and finds the loads for you, gets your gets a broker to use you to haul the load. Oftentimes, they will submit paperwork for you as far as invoicing is concerned. Um, so the dispatchers are another good way that you can, especially on the front end when you're just getting started. Getting a dispatcher can oftentimes be helpful to you. So you've got your authority, you've found some loads, and now you want to know as you're finding those loads, uh, hauling a load for somebody who isn't going to pay you is going to make your life pretty miserable. Typically, you've got a truck payment, trailer payment, insurance payment, and you're paying for fuel on top of all of that before you ever get to take a single dime home with you. And if you are hauling for somebody who ain't going to pay, then you're actually in the hole. So there's a number of different ways that you can do that. One, the load boards oftentimes will have credit ratings for the brokers. They'll show you how many days on average it takes them to pay. That's a good way to do it. If you end up factoring, and again, we'll get into cash flow in your business here in just a minute, but your factor will also run credit checks for you. Factor is really helpful in this regard because they are really dialed in to how well brokers are paying. As an industry, we do a good job of sharing data with each other about how each of us is being paid by the brokers. And you do have a team of people basically at the factoring company that's pulling credit, checking credit, handling collections. So just make sure that the folks that you find a load at a haul that they're actually going to pay you for it. Something else that folks oftentimes don't think about, especially people that are coming out of having been leased on to somebody else or being company drivers, is all the expenses that you're going to end up paying. Um, so we mentioned a second ago, oftentimes folks are having to finance their equipment. So whether that's the power unit or the trailers, you're going to have lease payments that you're going to have to make. You obviously have fuel costs. Um, Everybody knows you have to do that. Insurance is a real bear in the transportation industry. Typically, you have a large down payment on the front end, and then you've got monthly payments after that. In my experience, has been the biggest expense and the things that's the most difficult on a carrier, especially a brand new one. Just single owner operator is going to be insurance. You're going to pay a pretty hefty price tag for that out of the gate. But there's other things that you're going to run into. Obviously, you have to eat while you're on the road. Are you going to be taking showers in the truck stops? Depending on the type of freight that you're hauling, it could be that you'll have to clean especially if you're in the tanker side of things, you might have to clean your tank out depending on what your last load hauled was versus the next one, to make sure you don't have any contamination between the loads. Um, So making sure that you know what your expenses are is a huge part of this, because the expenses are all going to have to be added up to where you can actually figure out a per mile expense figure. And once you know that, it makes it a lot easier when you're bidding on loads to make sure you're bidding on them profitably. Um, Profitably here is certainly going to be covering all your expenses, but breaking even isn't what anybody wants to do. I certainly want to take a couple dollars home with you. One of the largest expenses I was talked about insurance, but the one expense that you have from getting to point A to point B every single time is going to be your fuel cost. And there are a ton of apps out there these days that will, in real time tell you how far you are away from one truck stop to the next, what the fuel prices are, and that sort of thing. What we've done at Provident, and you'll see this in other places, is using a fuel card. We've partnered with TCS. And this fuel card does a number of different things. One, it allows us to fund our carriers the same day when they sell us their invoices. So that's how you would get your money. But while you're on the road, they've got an app, and it's got a real-time feature that can tell you again where you are to the next truck stop. But the fuel cards typically have discounts associated with them. I know that our clients are saving anywhere from 60 to 70 cents a gallon, which where we are today, we're doing this interview May 24th of 2022. The fuel prices are elevated just because of stuff that's going on in the world. So any sort of savings that you can see basically drops to your bottom line for the miles that you're running. So the fuel card also, let's assume for the sake of argument that you have started out as a single driver, but then you decide you want to grow and you've got 3, 4, 5 more trucks. Well, with your fuel card program, you can actually give each of your drivers a fuel card. Makes it easier for them to get fuel, obviously, when they are on the road. But it also helps you get funds to them. Let's assume that you want to do payroll. You can put their paycheck on the fuel card. You can control the fuel card. And by that, I mean, you could set that card up to just be used at the pump. So it only buys fuel, or if you want your drivers to have access to funds to be able to go into the truck stop and buy food and different things like that, you can turn that on. So there's a lot of controls to it. One of the most important things about it is going to be the preparation work that it does for your fuel taxes that you have to do. So I think it's either monthly or quarterly that you're going to have to be worrying about this based on where you've been, where you bought the fuel, how many miles you're running. But the fuel tax prep work that the card will help with is invaluable. So the fuel, one of the big expenses you've got, but there's certainly ways to save on that. The next piece is, how are you going to make sure that you can run for 30 days and have enough cash to see yourself through? So particularly in the transportation industry, factoring is a very popular way for truckers to be able to get paid today for work they did today. You obviously know that when you bill the broker, they're not obligated to pay you today. That's why you'll see a lot of them will offer a quick pay solution, and they'll charge you a discount to pay you inside of 5 days or 10 days, rather than making you wait 30. The fuel that you have to pay, I mean, that's cash at the pump. You're not able to borrow money from Conoco or Love's or whoever, and then get to pay for your gas 30 days from now after you get payment from the brokers, the loads that you've hauled. So factoring companies are a huge help there. You basically deliver your load. You submit the paperwork to a factor. They buy that invoice from you, and you're either going to get your money that day, typically charge more for same day, or the next day would be in your checking account. Different ways to do that. You can either put it in a checking account. You can get a fuel card and have them put it on that. So there are different ways to get your money, but what's so important for you is having that cash on hand immediately, because you don't want to get behind on your truck payment or your trailer payment, certainly not your insurance. Insurance is one of the worst things in the world to not pay, because as soon as your insurance lapses, you're required to pull over to the side of the road. You can't even deliver the load that you've got. And there isn't a factor out there that's going to buy an invoice on a load that was not covered by insurance, because if the broker or the shipper finds out that it was hauled and it was not an insured load, they're not going to pay for it. So having a factoring company in your corner who is going to process your paperwork quickly, be able to get the money to you that day or the next day, depending on when you want it, is really vital. And so, from a cash flow perspective, you just got to make sure you've got enough cash to get you from one month to the next. Now, a lot of folks will factor, and they just factor forever. They just get used to it, and that's how they run their business, run their life. You've got a really good opportunity with a factoring company, though, if you can start putting away some money from every invoice and saving it. You can get to where you've got the cash to run your business without having to pay a factor their discount to do this for you. Honestly, our goal at Provident is to take care of you when you need us, educate you while you're here, and hopefully someday, if you choose to, you graduate and you use your own cash and you save that much more money on every load, because you've decided that you can cash flow it yourself. And we love stories like that. We want to be helpful to you when you need us. Another group of people will get to where they don't need us from a cash flow perspective, but because of everything else that we do for them, the back of the house that we run for them is basically an outsourced accounts receivable department. We handle all the billing for you. We're going to review your paperwork, get with the broker, make sure that they're going to accept the paperwork, and that way the broker obviously can get it onto the shipper, and they get paid, and make sure that we get paid. So the cash that you get in 24 hours is wonderful, and that's great, and that's part of it. But if you think about the person that you'd have to hire to sit in a seat at your office and handle all the invoicing, track down the paperwork, and then if folks aren't paying when they're supposed to, get on the phone, doing the collections, trying to get the money in there, all of a sudden the money that you pay us is not only for the cash itself, but then the services that we're providing. And a lot of folks will end up staying because they trust us to take care of the back of the house for them. So if you're looking at everything that you need to do as far as successfully kicking off a brand new company, you got to form the company. We're going to talk about that LLC. You go through your Secretary of State's office to do that. Finding loads to haul. We talked about load boards. Other friends that you have that are drivers that are finding loads as well can help point you in the right direction. Dispatchers are another group of people to do that. You do want to make sure that you don't just haul for anybody. There are going to be some folks out there, again, you get a load and you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be making $5 a mile on this thing. This is incredible. But then they never pay you. And then you find out after the fact they're offering $5 a mile because they weren't going to be paying you for it. And they were going out of business and all sorts of nasty things. So just know who it is that you're going to be doing the hauling for. Different ways we talked about doing that. Load boards obviously have credit ratings on there, but if you choose to factor, your factor is going to do that for you. Again, knowing your expenses, make sure that you know on a per mile basis everything that you have to cover. That's going to help you when you're looking at these loads to bid on them profitably. Fuel, obviously one of your largest expenses. There's different ways that you can save on fuel. Fuel card is certainly one of them, and being able to get those discounts on every gallon that you purchase. Managing through the cash cycle, making sure that you've got the cash in hand when you're at the pump to be able to get from point A to point B and get that load moved. Certainly you want to eat 3 times a day, so you need some cash for that. May have some folks at home that would like to eat too and are looking forward to you getting home, so you need to make sure they've got some cash. And so factoring companies can be very, very helpful to you in getting the money to you the same day or the next day for the loads that you're hauling so that you can take care of you and your family. And then lastly, you want to make sure you've got a company that is on your side, who is looking out for your best interest, that's running credit checks on new brokers, is doing the invoicing for you, is following up on collections. And once the money is collected, getting you whatever remaining balance that's due to you as quickly as possible. So that is, in a nutshell, a great way for you to get up and running as a new trucking company. And certainly if there's anything that we can do to be helpful to you at Provident, we'd like the opportunity to do it.